Welcome everybody. I'm Peggy Kuiper. I'm the Director of Sport and Recreation Business at UAF. And tonight we are talking about esports coaching, and we have a really great lineup as always with Nubzy, Flubby, and Pew. And they'll be talking to us about different aspects of esport coaching, which will be really great. And as always, thanks to Travis and Spencer for setting this up. We're really excited to talk about this cool topic tonight. So Travis, Flubby, and Flubby, Pew, and Nubzy, the floor is yours. So.
Thank you, Peggy, and welcome back everybody to our kind of last iteration of the esports panels for the spring semester. I am pumped for this one. I know I've been chatting with the guys before we jumped on here and learning a little bit more about them, but three coaches who coach at the professional level of their esports leagues, respectively, somewhat close to Fairbanks. I know that's always a challenge, as well as getting people up in that northwest corner to kind of relate to as well. So before I get kicked off, just want to say thank you to the School of Management, to UAF Esports, and to CTC Content Creation for all their help with everything that we've done this semester. Peggy Kuiper, as well as everybody else at the Sport and Recreation Business Program through the University of Alaska Fairbanks for allowing us the opportunity to do this. So without further ado, I will kind of kick it over to, I'll run it back and forth for the three different panelists that we have. But first, what I'd like is I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, and if you could say how long you've been coaching, as well as kind of what got you into the world of coaching, or what happened before, if you played professionally, if you played as an amateur, however it works. If you could give a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in it, and what happened before you got into coaching. So Nubzy, we'll start with you, and then I'll throw it over to our guys in Vancouver as well.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you guys having me. My name is Joey DiGiacomo. I go as Nubzy as my online alias. I've been professionally coaching Call of Duty for about 3 years. And I started as an amateur player in 2016, kind of grinding my way through that, made a lot of connections within the space. Never really got there mechanically, not as inherently gifted as a lot of these other people. But I used a lot of the knowledge and things that I learned, as well as the connections that I made through the amateur scene to essentially started coaching my friends to a world championship. I ended up placing within the top 8 at that, and within 8 months, I was on a professional team in the Call of Duty Pro League as the head coach, and I've been doing that for the past 3 full titles. So it's been a good ride.
And you're with the Seattle Surge, correct?
Yeah, probably should have mentioned that too. I'm with the Seattle Surge, one of the 12 franchise teams in the Call of Duty League.
Cool. Flubby, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Stephen Coronel. I'm from New York. Currently playing, or actually coaching for the Vancouver Titans. I'd say I've been coaching for about like 2 years. Played semi-professionally for about a year. I think it was just a good time for me to transition into coaching. When I was going to school, and it's easier to do something like coaching. At least when you're a semi-pro, you don't get to invest as much time. But obviously, it's different in the Overwatch League, which is what we're in, and now it's a full-time thing. So. Yeah, I also appreciate you guys inviting us over. So.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Ali Anwar. In-game name is Pew. I've been coaching for about a year and a half, going into my second year now. Flubby and I actually used to be teammates back in the day. Then we used to both play professionally or try and play semi-professionally. And now we're both coaching the same team. We ended up as staff on the same team afterwards, and then we ended up getting picked up together. So we've known each other for about 4-ish years now.
Yeah, we've only actually seen each other about twice.
Yeah.
We met each other for the first time like in person a year ago. But now we're
roommates living together in Vancouver and coaching the Titans in the Overwatch League. So.
Pew, I'll keep it with you. I'm curious this question for all three of you, knowing that you came up in the competitive side. What has been the biggest shift in your perspective, or I guess the biggest thing that you've had to adjust in going from a competitive player to now coaching competitive players?
I think the biggest thing is like you need to realize you're not playing anymore. So you're not like, you can't be the one telling the players like basically how you see the game. It needs to be like a back and forth kind of thing. because you're not the one playing anymore, so it's different. And it's a really hard shift in my opinion. Like for me, at least personally, like it was hard to like distance myself from the player's shoes. But at the same time, that also gives you a benefit because you've been in a player's shoes, so you know how they're feeling and how like what they're thinking and what you need to do to help them and like stuff like that.
Flubby, would you agree with that? Has it been a challenge for you
yeah.
as well?
I would say, yeah, I would say that's it's a pretty big thing. I'll take it a step further. I'll say like I guess and from a management perspective, or just like being more organized is like something that's very, very important. I mean, just like making sure you have everything that you want to go over, everything that is, you know, that you prioritize like things that are important, like maybe set strategies, or maybe it's just like playing a particular way. I think like prioritization is really important. I think that step is quite different. Like I said, when I was coaching semi-pro, I was literally I had class in the morning, then I would come coach. So, but that's not the case anymore. You got time to do this. You got to invest in it. So, I would say that from my perspective, it is like the managerial thing. So,
You're not in the spotlight anymore. Like
oh yeah.
like like it's the whole team. Everyone's involved. The players are the most important part. So
yeah,
like you're not the spotlight anymore.
Nubzy, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think 100% to all of that. I agree. I think the biggest thing for me that kind of transitioning and the biggest difficulty I found was just realizing the lack of control you have once the game actually begins. When you're playing, it's much less stressful in the sense that, you know, you're in the game, you're completely in the zone. Everything about it is just like fully focused on your teammates and in the game. But when you're coaching, you can do all the preparatory work in the world, and you can, you know, prepare your team as much as possible. You guys can have as many conversations in the world as you want, but once the game actually starts, you're on the sidelines, hoping it all comes together until that map is over. So, sort of learning how to deal with that lack of control outside of the game, or in outside of the game while they're playing, was probably the biggest thing for me to adjust to, and just that adds so much extra stress. It's, in my opinion, I don't know if I can speak for these guys as well. Coaching for me is far more stressful than playing ever was.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, crazy agree. I agree.
That's, you know, it's funny you say that. I know there's a few people on this call who have coached traditional sports before, myself included. And I think even I coached high school baseball for a couple of years. And I would agree with you, even at that level where there's no money, it's all amateur, there's no real pressure. It's definitely a little bit more stressful, even in that sense. I'm curious, in that same breath, and Nubzy, I'll keep it with you. When you talk about the differences, right, in the managerial side, the stress, you know, trying to control the things you can't control, and understanding that whole kind of dichotomy of being a coach, what is it in your opinion, like, what do you think what is one thing that makes a successful coach, I guess is the way I'll put it. So like, what is one thing that stands that you say, like, that coach is successful because of X? What is something that you think a good coach has to have in their pocket in order to be successful?
I think if you are able to change the tone in different ways that you're able to speak to certain people, player management as a whole in esports, and just like a traditional sport, I would assume, is very important. And the ability to have that kind of personality where you can talk to different people in the exact way that you know it's going to get through to them, and sort of on a dime be able to change that so it's memorable for the whole team, but also getting through to individuals. Some people take criticism poorly, some take it really well. Knowing who you're speaking to and how you have to speak to them to actually, you know, kind of get through that information. What makes a good coach, though, is someone that's able to listen to their team just as much as they're able to talk to them. If you can sit down and have an actual conversation with your team, don't control the conversation with, you know, only your opinions, only hearing your side of things. It's not what people look for in someone that they're trying to learn from. They want to have conversation. They want to be able to have dialogue. It's open. So just for me, just being able to talk to people as human beings, but also as players.
Communication. I think that is definitely a strong point. Pew, I'm curious your perspective. Would you agree communication, or what's one thing that you think makes a good coach?
Yeah, 100% communication. I 100% agree with what Nubzy said. Like, you need to have that personality that you know how to get through to everyone. He's a visual learner. He's not a visual learner. Like certain things like that, whatever benefits the team. And you also, but I feel like another thing that personally I've struggled with in the past is that distancing yourself from the players too. because you're not a player, so you can't, and you're upper management, you're basically somewhat their boss to a very decent extent. It's like there's a very thin line between basically cracking open a friendship versus, losing all of their respect. Basically, you're not a peer, you're a step above them at the same time. But I do 100% agree about the communication thing. Like you cannot be a brick wall. If you're a brick wall, it's not going to work out. Like it needs to be a discussion more so what people think, what you think, and then you can all agree on a consensus or stuff like that.
It's a really interesting point, and it's something that the few of us discussed before we jumped on here, is that the fact that you guys aren't that much older than the ones that you're coaching, and in some cases you might be younger. So I think that in itself, it makes it a huge challenge to your point, separating from the two. So Flubby, I'm curious, is there anything else in addition to those two things that you think make a successful coach?
I think something that's really important is being able to, like after you have that dialogue, just being able to give it back to your players in a way that everyone understands. I guess I would put that under like communication, but I think the most important thing is just as long as they understand it after like everyone pitches in their ideas. I think it is kind of your job to make sure that everyone understood it, and kind of making sure that the game plan is straightforward. There's no confusion. I think it falls under communication, but yeah, I agree with Nubzy and Hugh here. So.
Yeah. So Flubby, I'll keep it with you. To my knowledge, I don't think anybody on this call or anybody in our program plays professionally. But from your perspective, someone who might want to be considering a career either in coaching or just kind of in esports as a whole, what's some advice that you might give them if they're not kind of your traditional player moving into a coaching role? Maybe they're amateur, maybe they never got to that level. What's some advice that you would give now sitting where you're sitting to someone who might want to be where you're at?
I would say I like any other thing in life, it's just you put in the time and effort and you'll get what you put in. And I think it's just I think most people, I guess I'll speak for myself here, but obviously growing up, my parents weren't like, oh, this Overwatch thing is really cool. Like, no, it was like, go to school and you better stay in school. So I think like anything, just again, like if you were to go to school for soccer or something, you got a scholarship, you focus on your sport and you focus on your schoolwork. You do both hand in hand, but at some point you need to put in effort in something that you want to try. So in this case, it's esports, right? So I think it really is just like you put in the time, you put in the effort, make sure you take care of yourself, and you'll get what you put in. Or at least that's my opinion and how I see it. Because I mean, I'm a firm believer in like education. I think it is really important. But just like you could do soccer, and I always do soccer, but you can use soccer and education hand in hand. At one point, you got to push one of them over.
Sure. Pew, do you have anything to add to that?
I relate to that very hard because I was going to school full time till last semester, but then this year, since we moved here, I'm only taking a part-time class online, and I just turned 22. So like I'm not giving up on school, but at the same time, like at some point in time, you have to commit to one or the other, whichever it may be, whether it's coaching or whether it's coaching or the other thing, whatever you want to do.
It's anything. It's not. I wouldn't say it's exclusive to esports. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like it really is just like it's not exclusive to the sport that we're.
Yeah, like if you want to go for something and you have to give up school for it, like it's worth a shot. But at the same time, like you have to stay in school. Also, if you're not coming up as a pro player, like the biggest advice I can give you is just do content, put something out there, put your name out there, get on a team, just do something. Like even if it's out of your comfort zone, the more stuff you put out there, regardless of the quality of the content, the more exposure you get, the more people get to know about you. Like it could be anything from like how do pro players get exposure? They basically play on the ladder, they play ranked, and they get noticed, or they start streaming, or they put out YouTube clips or Twitter clips, whatever it may be. Like you just have to do something, put out content, like get yourself noticed.
It's unique, right? It's unique in gaming that in traditional sports, I guess you could create content around breaking down plays or X's and O's or things of that nature. But in gaming, you kind of have this built-in platform for people who want to use it and will go out of their way, in Twitch and YouTube and some of these other things. it's very organic and kind of grassroots to gaming as a whole. Like Twitch doesn't exist without gaming. So it's interesting that you bring that up, because it's trying to draw some perspective into traditional sports, and that's something that I guess exists now, but because you could use that same platform, but didn't exist, 10 years ago even. Nubzy, I'm curious from your perspective, what you think, some sort of advice that you would give to students that might be interested in sitting in your chair.
Yeah, kind of a parallel to what they were talking about. They were giving examples of, kind of if you don't feel like you're in a position when you're in school and you think you can really take that shot, do it. I did that. I was in college. I was, I think, 19 or 20 at the time. I just started coaching at an amateur level, and I got an offer for a team that was in a qualifier to make the pro league. And I was sitting there in class one day, and I decided, I was like, yeah, this just isn't for me, which is advice that I would give absolutely no one. But I kind of sat there and weighed my options for about 20 minutes and made a usual me impulsive decision and dropped out. And I regret it still, to be honest, of just not the dropping out itself, but just not thinking it over more, putting more time into the idea. At least finishing a semester probably would have been. I was through like 2 semesters already, so at least finishing one more of those probably would have been decent. And honestly, it didn't work out. The team that I took that offer from didn't make the pro league, and I kind of sat there once we lost our qualifying match, and I was like, wow, I just threw away a lot of things. I just threw away a lot. Luckily, within that same space, I did get picked up into the pro league with a team, so it did end up working out, and that was one of the first lucky things, I guess, to happen from my hard work. But it's chasing any dream and ambition is something that I'll always tell someone to do, and it's as long as you're taking precautions to make sure if if it doesn't work out for some reason, you're not in the worst position possible is always good. On top of any advice, I would say just taking advantage of every opportunity you get, whether in the long run that ends up being a good or a bad decision. Just taking advantage of opportunities, learning, especially when climbing from an amateur level or anything like that, to climb sort of the social ladder, something like that. But also knowing who to stay loyal to when it comes to different teams, different even business owners at some point. Just knowing where to position yourself within the political space of esports can be just as important as any other job. So just working through that and building relationships was a huge thing that got me into the position that I am.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that this call especially, and I think our sport and recreation business program as a whole, we have a lot of non-traditional students, whether it's military or other reasons, going back to school later on in life, that I think there's a lot of people here that will watch this, that are watching this, that can empathize with that, hey, something else came up, something else was more important at the time. And I think this program as a whole is a kind of a great example of being able to, if you choose in life, to go back and figure that path out eventually. But to your point, like, I think all three of you kind of reiterated this, like, if there's an opportunity in front of you, like, jump at it, run for it, and do whatever it takes to get there. And if it doesn't work out, then you figure it out. I mean, you guys are all, it seems like you've put all your chips in the middle on this, and it's clearly worked out for you to this point. So I think that's pretty good advice as a whole. Transitioning a little bit, and Nubzy, I'll keep it with you. The last year has been a challenge for everybody, right? I think it's been very tough for traditional sports. Speaking personally, I know in your professional sports leagues, traditional sports, a lot of jobs were cut, a lot of people were furloughed, with no sports going on, no tickets being sold. Gaming, obviously, there is tournaments and there is tickets and events that happen pre-pandemic, but I would say probably one of the the only area that was necessarily built for being remote in some ways. I think it's not as easy as just, hey, let's play online. But how has COVID affected you as a coach? And then how has it affected your team's process as a whole? Like, what shifts have you had to make since the pandemic broke out?
Yeah, I mean, when it started last year, me and one of the other players were living in Los Angeles at the time. And obviously that area got hit pretty hard when the pandemic started. And, as for me as a person, as well as a coach, it was just like I feel for most people, it was extremely difficult. I'm 3,000 miles away from my family, just kind of struggling to get out of bed some mornings and want to even do my job, feeling like it's kind of pointless. But luckily, we were in a position where our jobs were safe and we could do it remotely, which was great. Speaking in more of a sense of competition, competitive integrity with it being online and everything, it's a lot harder. We talk a lot in the Call of Duty scene specifically about some players are built for the lights, they're built to get on that stage in front of thousands of people and just play. And some people thrive in that environment. In the same regard, some people are better online. It's something we joke about sometimes with some of the up and coming players coming up, saying that you're young and you haven't played on stage yet. You'll see what it's really like. But whether there's truth to that or not, it's been difficult, and we don't take for granted the position that we're in, and we understand how lucky we are to still be in this spot. But at some point, when people do discuss it, I feel like it's hard for them to take a step back and look at it from our point of view, which is that it can be difficult, and it has been really difficult, especially because a lot of teams are not based in their hometown. Most of these players are living thousands of miles away from their families, and it can be. We have some players that are European that are on visas that living in the United States, and they haven't seen their families in almost 2 years. One of the players on the London team, there's a London team. One of their players just went home. He quit basically. He said, "I can't do this anymore. I have to go see my family," and just went back to England. So it affects a lot of people in different ways, but I feel like once people take a step back and they're a little bit more empathetic to how it could affect us, it's a lot easier to see how it can really impact an esport in the same regard as any other workplace. But it's hard. And doing my job too. I know you mentioned, just as a coach, like doing my job can be more difficult. I feel like when you're in person with people, it's way easier to get points across a lot of the time, and you just want to and some people you just have to give them that look. Like they won't take you serious until you actually just give them that in-person look. When I'm just sitting here online every day, though, it could be a little difficult sometimes, but we've transitioned pretty well, and we're just excited to get back. We're excited to get back onto the stage.
Yeah. So Flubby and Pew, I know you guys being in Canada, that I don't think either of you are Canadian, so I'm sure that adds a little bit of a challenge as well. But Flubby, I'll throw it to you. How is
sure.
that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But actually, for us, it's COVID's been pretty bad, I guess, because we started last season, which is roughly around like May, which is like the middle of the Overwatch League season last year. But actually, since we've been doing semi-pro, that is predominantly, at least for Overwatch, it's online. So you never really actually see your players. You never actually get to see their facial expressions, or maybe they you say something, or maybe another plays something you don't necessarily get to see if they disagree with it, because you can't see. Like right now, I'm talking with my hands, right? Like they wouldn't be able to see that. So for us, this is the first time we've actually met our players in person not too long ago, because we just completed our 14-day quarantine for Canada. We flew out here recently. So we actually, for the first time since COVID, and honestly since we've been coaching, met them for the first time. So we've never had that experience that Nubzy said, where you can actually, he's talking about the look, but we can only imagine what the look is gonna actually improve on. So I can't wait to actually get coaching in person, at least from my point of view. But regardless, COVID's been kind of it is annoying, not being able to be in person sucks in general. Just social interaction, all of that stuff is quite important when it comes to sports in general. It is that camaraderie. It is that teamwork that really gets you those W's. So yeah, take it easy.
Yeah, Pew, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Flubby and Nubzy said. It's basically the emotion you feel when you're in person. Like at least if you run a parallel to actual sports, because I used to play soccer predominantly, and the emotion that you feel in person when if you're someone's teammate and you see them not giving as much effort as you, or having an off day, or something's going on, it's so much easier to address the problem than it is online. It is so much easier. We've been here for 2 weeks, and it's already been and we've had maybe 2 discussions in person due to quarantine, but it's been so much easier to talk to people and get their opinions across. The quiet guy will also talk, the loud guy will obviously also talk. It's just so much easier to do this.
I used to have a baseball coach that used to say that teams really bond through traveling, and when you spend time together on the bus or on the plane or whatever that is, that's really when a team starts to form well. And to your point, when the quiet person starts talking or giving it back to the guy who talks the most, and you see the dynamics really start to shake out. I didn't really think about that from a COVID perspective, that being a challenge, because you might play together for 8 hours a day, but you don't really have a whole lot of conversation outside of the gameplay if you're not in person with one another. And I think that translates to the workplace too. If you start a new job, which is something you guys started in during this, start a new job, you don't even get to know the person that you're sitting next to, proverbial sitting next to, until you get there. So I think that is an interesting dynamic as well that I didn't think much about. So one of the things that we talked about earlier, and I'm curious as to your perspective a little bit deeper, when talking about with players that either you're the same age as or you're younger than, and Pew, I'll start with you. Have you had an experience yet where this has happened and you've had to establish the dynamic between the two, or how do you manage that? And I'm curious as to three of your perspectives on that, with older or younger or kind of the same age as you. Then how do you draw that line in the sand that, listen, I'm a coach, I'm not your friend, I'm not your colleague? Like, I find that would be a bit of a challenge in the gaming world.
Oh yeah, 100%. Especially, I feel like it's easier to become friendlier and like friends with like the younger players, because sometimes you can honestly, like, especially since I and Flubby and Nubzy, all of us probably came up as players, like you can sometimes see yourself in them, like you were this guy at some point in time, so you see yourself in them, so it's like easier to like get emotionally attached and like be emotionally attached to them. But at the same time, it's like the older players, the veterans, like I feel like they understand the most that, okay, there is a definitive like tier break in between my position and my coaches. Like regardless of if I disagree with him, I agree with him. Like regardless of whatever situation we're in, he is my coach, and like there has to be this mutual respect between us for the work. And it's definitely, especially with the players that we worked in semi-pro, because in semi-professionally, like the environment isn't as professional. Like there doesn't need to be a defined tier break. No one's really getting paid. Like there's not really, like if you're late for practice, like what am I gonna do? Like the best we can do is cut you from the team. Like there's no fining. There's actually no repercussions. There's no consequences. So once we moved up here, it's like definitely been a little bit more of a challenge to like emotionally detach from the players and like work with them like that. But there just needs to be that mutual respect between you guys, that regardless of the situation we're in, like everyone realizes that he's the coach and I'm the player.
Flubby, do you have anything to add to that?
No, actually, I would agree with everything. I think I've gone through the same things that he has gone through, and obviously we've been together for quite some time. So yeah, I would agree with everything. I have nothing else really to add to that.
Yeah, Nubzy, do you have anything to add to that?
It's very hard. So Call of Duty specifically has been an esport that's been around for a really long time, and a lot of the players that are professionals now have been professionals for a long time. So being the odds of a coach or a player rather coming in and already being friends with a coach are pretty high. For example, whether this was originally planned on being the team or whatever the dynamic was during like roster formation, this team that I currently coach, 3 of these guys I've been best friends with for over 4 years. I mean, one of them I've lived with. I've been a roommate with the guy. We've been to weddings together. Like I've known the guy forever. And sometimes, yeah, it is difficult to get like certain points across without him just resorting back to like, oh, it's Joey talking to me. Like sometimes, but I've worked with him now for over a year, so we've definitely gotten past that to a point where everything I say, it just kind of, it is, until we can have like a argument about it. And having friends on a team, there's positives and negatives to it. The biggest positives is no filter. You can actually just say whatever, and you're not going to hurt anyone's feelings. But I have worked with teams where I haven't had, people that I've been really close with. Last year, for example, our team had, my best friend was on that team. But at the start of the season, the other 4 players, I was not good friends with at all. And they were older, and they probably had trouble at first giving me, that kind of coach player respect. But after a while, you mold through that and you try to build that and you show them that you do know what you're talking about. And just because of their accolades, whatever they've accomplished, they can still gain something from listening to you. But yeah, it's hard sometimes to have a team full of people that you've been friends with, and you've gone out and had fun on the town and everything, and then go back the next day and work with those guys in a professional environment. But I wouldn't trade it a lot of the time for anything, because those are also where some of the best teams get formed, is building, it's like Travis said too, building the best relationships while on road trips and, traveling on planes, whatever it may be. It's the same thing of just like sitting in a TeamSpeak call at night after practice and just sitting there and talking to like your friends. You guys have known each other for years, and just building that little bit of extra chemistry can always help. So there's definite positives to it, but sometimes the negatives do get shown a little bit when you try to have a serious conversation, and maybe it's not as serious as it should be. But
Yeah.
Best of both worlds.
So Nubzy, I'll keep with you. We talked about communication earlier as being kind of the key part of being a successful coach. And then we've talked about COVID and the challenges of being remote and what all the other things that it's brought with. How or what strategies have you taken to being a better communicator in COVID? Obviously, in a normal setting, you're with the guys all the time. You say, hey, I need you to do this. Hey, you can have a one-on-one pull-off conversation or a small group conversation. It's a little bit more challenging when you're remote. Have you found any strategies that you would say have worked from a communication perspective that might maybe took you a little while to get used to given the circumstances?
Just like checking in on people, I think. Just like talking to people individually and making sure everyone's okay. Just like whether it be mentally, physically, anything like that, just having more like one-on-ones with people and just making sure they're always in the right headspace. Because when you're in person and COVID's not a thing, it's much easier to look at a person and say, they're having a bad day or whatever it may be. But sometimes when you're online and it's just like that for 365 days, you don't really get to see that. So kind of my job has shifted a lot into reaching out, at night sometimes, being like, hey, I noticed that your communication today wasn't too great. Is everything all right? Because they're pretty bad times. Things can hit pretty hard. So sort of transitioning to being more personality based and making sure that everyone's good so they can give themselves to the game fully. So it makes everyone's job easier. But a lot of that too is just acceptance of the situation we're in as well is huge. It's like something that I had to deal with last year, and it took me a while to, we had our delusions that we were going to be, back in person in a few months. And then very quickly we realized that was not going to happen at all. Just kind of that acceptance that some teams are in more fortunate situations as well, where they do get to be all together. There are some teams that are all in one area. And then they are just practicing together in facilities, which just fine. But we've accepted that it's not the situation that we're in, and we don't let that hold us back at all. We put in the same amount of effort that we would if we were in person. So that's what's helped us a lot, is just kind of accepting the position we're in.
And Flubby, I know you guys have almost entirely been remote in this time that you've been in your role. What are some things that you do, or both, we'll start with Flubby. How have you increased that communication only being remote, for things that aren't necessarily solely about gameplay?
Yeah, we actually tried a bunch of things just to kind of, a lot of one-on-one time is kind of what we settle, and then being like something that just helps a lot. I think, I can speak for Pew and I, but we like check in with our players every now and then, towards the end of last season. Something that we did end up trying was that at the beginning of practice, we would all turn on our cams, just kind of talk for a little bit and just say the stuff that we have to do for the day. And, we did that for a little bit. Did it help? I'm not sure, but we were just trying things, right? So yeah, I don't know. I hope now we're in a position where we actually can be in person. So I just can't wait to.
So it should be easy.
I hope so. Yeah, should be good.
Pew, did you have anything to add to that?
I agree with everything he said. Especially during times like this, motivation is so hard to find. Even myself, I remember mentioning to Flubby about a few months ago. I was like, I cannot wait to move. I'm tired of getting out of my bed, walking 2 steps to my workplace. I am so done. And this is the same place where I work. It's the same place where I play games. It's the same place where I the same place where I do my homework. I am just done. I need to get out.
Yeah.
Like, motivation is really hard to find, and like the biggest thing is you need to just keep motivating your players and talking to them.
Yeah.
And keep checking them. Just make them feel like they're not alone in this. Like everyone else is going through this together. Basically, as a team.
Yeah.
Have to agree with that. Right behind this backdrop is literally my bed. Like it's hard. Like it's rough to just turn out of this chair, walk 3 feet behind me, and my bed's right there. It's difficult every day.
You gotta get to work, and you just turn on your PC. It's right behind you.
Yep. no.
I feel
It's
you.
kind of hard to find motivation behind that sometimes, but it's what you got to do.
Listen, I don't think that's just gaming. I'm in hour number 12 in this chair. So I feel you guys in the same sense. I think I got up for dinner. So, it's you're not alone in that sense, which I'm sure, I don't know if that helps, if it's more comforting or if it just.
No, I mean, it's everyone's struggle. So it's the way the world is right now.
Yeah. So, I respect that. I think, Pew, I'm going to keep it with you. I'm curious, zooming out a little bit. Esports gaming has been going on for a long time. We were talking about this before, and I asked about coaches that have been doing this for a long time. But really, we're still in the, I would say, call it infancy of what esports is going to be. I think you have a lot of money coming in right now, a lot of investments, a lot of seed funding, teams, big time cash coming in from all areas, thinking that this is the next boom, and it very likely is. I'm curious, in your perspective, what does esports look like over the next 10 years, whether it's Overwatch or whether it's just leagues in general or teams or developers, or what's one thing, or, and it's a very broad question, but where do you see the industry going, 10 years down the road?
But hopefully COVID's over by then.
Yeah.
So they can have, because I'm assuming most of it's trending towards traditional sports more and more, where teams are investing, franchises are coming through, and like people are buying tickets to go watch their teams play, buying tickets to fan meetups, buying merchandise, stuff like that. I can see it being like just keeping this trajectory, not being being much larger than it is right now in 10 years. But I also see something just for developers and from a business standpoint, I can see games, big esports, if you're planning to make a game that's a big esport, for it to come out as free to play, just to increase the player base, rather than like the biggest esports in the world right now is what? Fortnite? League? Fortnite, League, Dota used to be, CSGO, like all of them have free to play, if not the full game, the versions of it, just to get people involved, because at the end of the day, the professional players are not like gonna keep the game alive. It's the casuals.
Yeah.
Like the professional players are there's 800 people in the Overwatch League, including team staff, in a game that's 50, 60 million people are playing. That's the professional players aren't gonna keep the game alive. So
yeah.
Tending towards the casuals will be a pretty big thing.
Flubby, do you have any other thoughts 10 years down the road, what this world looks like, esports wise?
Yeah, I think I actually think something that we'll see way more of. I mean, I'm going to use a pretty big example. I'm sure I hope most of you know about them. I know about them, but FaZe Clan, branding wise, right? You have a team. They started in COD, and they now they're a powerhouse. You could use 100 Thieves as well, but now they have their own branding, clothing, they have their own stuff that comes out that's not really related to esports. It's just their brand now. I don't know if you want to use someone who's famous, LeBron's son, Bronny, right? He does a lot of stuff with FaZe, right? That's pretty big. I think social media just in general, media distribution, all that stuff. I think you'll see that to increase heavy throughout the next few years. In terms of league expansion, I mean, it really just depends on the ecosystem of the esport. Whether it's CDL, COD. I mean, CDL and Overwatch League, they're all franchised, but not so much Fortnite, where it's single player. They're really just that their competition is just third party tournaments or big sponsorship tournaments. So I think you'll see some more development, maybe more defined way to get money out of the esports that we have currently. But definitely like social media and getting that money through is kind of like what we'll see rise up. See like at least for my opinion anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Nubzy, 10 years down the road, where do you see gaming and esports headed?
I see wide scale expansion for sure. I think it is going to be much, much bigger over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. I'd even say esports as a whole will get much larger when it comes to people actually paying attention to the esport itself. To touch a little bit on what Flubby said there with the ecosystem of the esport itself, I think that could be potentially the most hindering thing to esports in general. I think organizations and franchises alike have done truly an amazing job, kind of like an astonishing job of like putting their branding out there and getting these partnership deals with like these companies. And it's kind of insane to look at and see just how well they're doing with it. Bringing money in, venture capitalists, anything like that, just buying these franchise spots. It's crazy to see. My fear going in for a lot of esports is player base and keeping competition alive. Call of Duty, for example, will be the first to admit we have 12 teams right now. If we had 20 teams, 4 to 6 of those teams are not looking too competitive. Like bad. Our challenger scene is what we call them. It's the amateur scene. They're fine. We do a bad job in Call of Duty, if I'm being honest, of nurturing a lot of young talent. It's a movement that I've sort of been a huge proponent of, and I've tried to start from ground up as one of the few coaches that really does look at amateur talent. I give those guys a lot of credit, and I try my best to nurture the scene as well, because I know that without up and coming players, the esport just dies, it falls off, the competitive value goes away. So the biggest thing for a game like Call of Duty specifically for us right now is to make sure that we're supporting people that not just being dream crushers and saying you won't make it, you're not good, you're terrible, and actually saying like, okay, let's give these people a chance, because there is untapped talent out there that even challengers and amateur players haven't discovered yet. So sort of building each other up and helping us grow. It's something that Call of Duty as a whole has had problems with, is helping each other grow as like a scene, and just letting the game kind of do the growing for us because it's so popular. But if that all works out, if every esport has an amazing amateur scene, which spills over into like an extremely competitive league, esports in 10 years it's everything. It's so open regionally too, where different esports are essentially dominated at this point by different regions, where people are putting so much time. And Call of Duty is North America. I don't like to say dominated, but definitely the top end of the teams are North American. You have Overwatch, where I am not too sure on the construct of it, but I'm assuming regionally there's some issues there when it comes to like North American. We were speaking earlier about maybe them not being as good right now. League of Legends, where the North American scene is, to be completely honest, Call of Duty is probably the only esport where North America is looking pretty strong right now. Everything else is kind of European and then sort of like the Southeast Asia ran in that area. So just keeping it so like alive in all those different regions, and also keeping it inclusive is the biggest thing, which I would never want to trash my own esport or my own league, but it's something Call of Duty has had a problem with. And if we want to be as big and as expansive, that's what we got to do. And I do have faith we'll get there, and I have faith in 10 years the Call of Duty League will be massive, and I think we'll be looked at a much wider scale than just gaming in general. I already feel like we have some fans that don't even know what Call of Duty is, and they just live in Seattle, and they're like, yeah, this is something cool with the Seattle brand. We want to be a part of this. And just having that sort of location-based franchising too makes it really big and really important.
I think those are great. And to your point, to me, gaming as a whole, I think the challenge is how do you monetize, right? Like to your point, there's been brands, big money that's been spent by major brands and getting that national, international exposure. And a lot of that value comes through traditional media type areas, brand overlays on Twitch streams, incorporating logos into your background or backdrop, or, there hasn't been as much in-game type exposure that you can. I know Fortnite has done some of it, the 2K, the sports games. Obviously, signage is kind of natural to our game, so it makes it a little bit easier. But to me, I think that a challenge is figuring out how to monetize this beyond social channels and traditional media channels, if there is a way, because too, and once you start getting in person, it's going to be a little bit easier again, just like it is for traditional sports. But I know just seeing the lines of revenue is a little bit different because it's not ticket based the same way that most traditional sports are. So how do you drive those numbers, which I think it will get there. It's just going to, I think COVID has kind of stunted everybody. It'll be interesting to see how creativity spurns coming out of all of this personally in the next 10 years. So we have about 10, 15 minutes left. I want to open it up for questions. I have a couple more here, but before I jump into that, is there anybody who wants to raise their hand or you just jump right in and ask a question to our panelists here?
Is that all right if I go?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. Well, my name is Oxine, and I'm currently attending the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I don't know if I need to say any of that, but my question is actually for Joey, and it's about, is it okay if I call you Joey?
Please call me Joey. I prefer that over all else.
Okay. So when you were talking about cultivating the upcoming talent for the CDL, and the reason I'm asking is because before Cold War, I never really watched video games, but then now COVID hit, and so I was like, okay, what's to watch on YouTube? And then I watched CDL and all the matches and everything like that, and so now I'm watching CDL and Valorant. But like, how are you cultivating the up and coming talent, I guess? Like, and you mentioned that you were trying to do it from the grounds up, like, so like what are you doing for that? I'm just interested.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's such an expansive scene too when it comes to amateurs and challenger players, to try to like cultivate that talent and build it up. Something that I'll start with what the CDL has done. They've put a lot more money into the challenger scene, keep people motivated, because a lot of these guys in the amateur scene are around the same age as the professional players, and they're just kind of on their last legs right now trying to make it. So they've done a really good job putting a lot more money into that. At the beginning of this year, we had like a scouting combine kind of thing, like a scouting series where we drafted these amateur teams, and I was pretty critical of it. To be honest, I feel like there were certain points where it could have been ran better, but it's a learning experience, and I think if we have those in the future, it'll be much better. But right now, and I talk about this on my stream a lot, I think right now it's important that we showcase as much amateur talent as possible. And anytime that I can even stream a match of an amateur tournament and maybe cast over it, do whatever, but just showing that talent, showing people out there on Reddit or wherever they may be that there is more than just the pro scene, and being sort of that connector, that avenue for amateur players to the fan base to see those amateur players. Any way to do that, and if I can help in any way, that's kind of what I mean by cultivating it and just making it so there's a lot more transparency between the amateur scene and the viewership, fan bases, things like that, and even higher up, the pro teams, the ownership groups, to see like, look, just because these people are writing you emails saying I'm a 2-time champion, pick me up, there might be a kid that's 18 that's been grinding, and he's much more talented. So any way to show it.
Okay. Is there any idea in the CDL to look towards maybe like collegiate teams? Because I think collegiate teams have been like slowly forming. Is there any idea within the CDL to maybe find talent out? I'm just interested because I also started my own little Valorant team on my own, but we're not good in any way. It's just more for fun.
I think from the CDL perspective, I feel like the collegiate scale right now is definitely on the lower end, the back burner type things while they're focusing, since we're a super new league, just making sure the pro scene is thriving, as well as the challengers, to make sure that's good. Something you mentioned about the collegiate scene, and I find it really interesting, is I have watched some of those matches, and honestly, I know that it's college teams playing against other college teams, so the talent scaling might be a little bit skewed. But there are like seeds of talent you can see within that. Call of Duty as an esport as a whole, the game is relatively simple when you're playing it at a low scale. You get on, it's a first person shooter, like it's but something that I think kind of hurts the college scene right now, and it would have to come from sort of the higher level or a ground up stance, is there are amateur players that are in college that are competing with these college teams. The issue is they can do well with those college teams, but then they go and they play their actual amateur tournaments and they're not playing with the same guys. And it makes it so, they're playing to make their money, their scholarships, whatever they are, with these college players, and they're turning around and playing with, people that they might think are better. And I feel like that does hurt the collegiate scene a little bit to not have that kind of consistency in players. So I think if there was some kind of rule where, and it would be hard to enforce this because then people would have to make some very difficult decisions. But if there was some kind of rule where, down the line, if there is enough money and enough interest in the collegiate scene, if they said we want to have a collegiate league where we want, the best of the best to be able to play for these teams, and we also, this would be further down the line, but this would obviously be the most ideal, is we don't want random kids at our school trying to play and just, join the team immediately. We would like to reach out to people that we see in, like, maybe at an amateur level, young kids that maybe haven't even turned 18 yet, but are, dominating online tournaments and things where they can compete, and saying, we want to offer you the ability to come to our school, barring grades, and sort of lead our team and foster that talent within it. There's so much room to grow, and there's so many avenues you can take, and there's a lot of decisions that are, life or death when it comes to the competitive integrity of the esport itself. The collegiate side of things I find really interesting. I do enjoy watching those too, because I'm from Ohio, so college sports is very, very important. So I take the collegiate side very serious. Our Ohio State team is quite bad, so I'm just hurt every time I have to watch.
Yeah, the second best school in Ohio, the
Second
Ohio
best.
U is a step above, but
Whoa.
that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, I have one more for everybody. All right. Well, I'm curious. Flubby, we'll start with you. One of the things that we've covered across all of these panels is misconceptions about gaming. And I think we have a handful of students in our, I don't know if they're on this one, but have been on the panels in the past, who have kids who are of, the middle school, high school age, where they're playing video games all the time. And, in their generation, when they grew up, you go outside and play and you do these things. And I think you had mentioned it, Flubby, I think to start, like, your mom probably wasn't crazy about you wanting to pursue a career in Overwatch and things of that nature. So I'm curious, what would you view as the biggest misconception about gaming or gamers as a whole?
I'll say two things. I think a big one is that they don't socialize. Because honestly, we do. Like, this guy's been one of my best friends for 4 years, and just random, like, right? I'm like, hey, I like Overwatch. I'm gonna look for a team, and then this guy comes out of nowhere, right? And how do you expect these things to happen, right? I just think, like, whether it's like you go to school, like high school, like, you go to school, you come back home, turn on your PC, you play with some guy who's like from Minnesota, and like you're just friends for some reason. Like it just happens, right? And then you just you sign off, you go play your club sports, but at the end of the day, like, you still come back home and you guys are playing games again. So I think it is just like a misconception that, like, there is no, like, you're just like a hermit, like you don't socialize, you don't get out. And to that point, I'll also add that I'm pretty sure there are a majority of gamers that, like, actually love sports. Like, I'm one of them. Just like competition in general, it's like natural, right? So you always want to, whether it's like, hockey, whether it's soccer, some people like, poker, right? So, like, it's all competitive. So I guess those are like my main misconceptions, are the ones that I think of off the top of my head right now.
Pew?
I 100% agree with him. People think, like, they're just clumped up in their room all day playing games, not doing anything else, like a bunch of Coke cans on the ground. And obviously there's like your stereotypical guy, like, every now and then, but most of them are like just normal people like everyone else, honestly. Like, how would I have known that Flubby, like, loves soccer like I do? If, like, yeah, and man, like we came here, we got a soccer ball, we were playing soccer yesterday. It's like we're just socializing with each other. We're doing like we're chilling, we're just friends, and we're playing hardcore games. And honestly, most of the gamers you meet, if they're especially if they're a little bit older, they'll say they got into it due to their competitiveness, the competitive edge. You know, the reason I got into games myself was because I couldn't play soccer anymore for a multitude of reasons, and I needed that competitive itch. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get into gaming and like actually try to be the best to my ability. And there's just this misconception that everyone like they're just sweaty nerds, right? And which is like 99% of the time it's not true at all.
It's funny you say that. At 30 years old, my competitive nature is keeping me away from gaming because I just get the flu. I'm wiped from everybody. It's not even close anymore. So I don't even try. Nubzy, from your perspective, misconceptions about gamers.
Well, aside from the competitive aspect, because I think everyone here will tell you the competitive side is everything. It's the exact same for me. It just drives me. Speaking on the social part as number one is, I would venture to say that gamers might be more social than your typical person. We're going out there and we're talking to so many different people every day from so many different areas and just trying to make friends. And whether we keep the exact same face in person and we're the same people, we're still, that's still how you really feel deep down. Like you're talking to these guys and you're friends with them. I mean, I've met everyone that I consider close to me now that I hang out with on a regular basis too, are from gaming. I mean, it's like a whole new world. My best friends are from gaming. I've been to weddings because of gaming. I've had friends pass away that I met through gaming, and it's a whole world of, it's everything. Like once you make it your life, it's everything, and it brings out this sort of new social structure, and we're cool too. Don't get that twisted. I have better fashion sense than most people I know. We have a nice culture going on around here, which is another thing from esports as a whole that brings is so many different regions, even within the United States itself. You get all these different, so much diversity when it comes to the cultures, like the way people, accents even we sometimes it rubs off on your teammates, like ways to dress, things like that, music. It's amazing. The other one I think is like health as a whole. And this is something that parents get concerned a lot about. My parents have been supportive throughout my entire esport career as a whole. It's something that I feel like doesn't happen a lot, but I have maybe some foolish parents at times that maybe put a little bit too much trust into me. But the biggest thing they said was just take care of yourself, more mentally than anything. Just make sure I'm always in a good headspace, and we can be healthy. Most of the I feel like the pro players in Call of Duty at least are avid gym rats. Go to the gym all the time. Keep yourself healthy because look good, feel good, you play good. It's kind of like been the motto. That's how it works. I'll be the first to admit I was not one of those. Up until the last few months, I was 300 pounds for majority of my life. I weigh like 185 now. As you can see, this jersey is still from then. It just hangs off me. But I was at a point where it was unhealthy for me, and I was kind of sitting in and just doing my job and then ordering food and things like that. But I've realized I didn't want to do that anymore, so I stopped. But any misconception about a gamer can be used in the same regard as any other person, because that's just what we are. We're just any other person. We just have a hobby, and sometimes we have an occupation that puts us in this world, and we're in a completely different space, and that's a good thing. So, yeah, people just gotta be nice.
Well, thank you guys. We're at time here. This has been a very insightful hour. I feel like there's been a couple times where I didn't think of any, had no idea that you would say what you did, and I think it made a lot of sense. And I think everybody here appreciates your perspective on all of these things. So from me and on behalf of the program, the university, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it very much so, and look forward to following all three of you in your paths and seeing kind of the competitive success that will follow on all of this as we go forward. So thank you guys very much, and I look forward to hopefully doing this again in the future.
Absolutely. I'm always around, always home.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys.